Now that we have our factory properly working, we're able to create a bunch of tile objects. It's time to set up our initial tile for the point 0, 0 inside of our coordinate system. The first thing we need to do is we need to go to our header file for ccViewController.h, and I'm going to go above my IB outlets here and I'm going to add 2 returns, and we're going to create a section for instance variables. Now, these are going to be properties that we're going to create that are going to allow us to hold on to certain information and access it from multiple methods inside of our view controller class. The first property we're going to want to create is going to be our current point. So we're going to do @point, non-atomic, and this is going to be a primitive, so we don't have a strong. And we're going to create a CG point, which is a struct, and structs allow us to package multiple primitives together, so that would include floats, integers, and bools. This is kind of a way of containing them in one spot. So we're going to write current point here, and we'll see how to use a CG point in just a minute. The next thing we want to add is another property, and I'm going to use strong non-atomic since this is going to be an object, and we're going to make this an NS array, and we're going to call this tiles. And what we're going to do is we're going to only have to create our tiles from our factory once. We'll set that equal to self.tiles, and then we'll be able to use our tile objects throughout all of our methods inside of the ccViewController.m file. Now let's navigate to ccViewController.m, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do a little bit of refactoring here. So I'm going to remove my NSLog statement. Instead of writing NSArray tiles, which creates a local variable tiles, let's use our property so that we can save our tile objects in this property tiles and use it in all of our methods. Next, we need to go ahead and we need to create an initial point where we currently start in our project. So we're going to start at 0, 0, which is the bottom left-hand corner of our grid system, our coordinate system. And in order to do that, we can say self.currentPoint is equal to cgPointMake, and we can give it an initial value 0 and 0, which says that on the x-axis we're at point 0 and on the y-axis we're at point 0. So in order to create this struct, we use a function called cgPointMake, and it takes 2 arguments, which are floats, 0 and 0, and I can actually go ahead and log these out to my console by doing %f, and we can say self.currentPoint. Well, how do I access the first value? I do .x, and I can do self.currentPoint.y. So I can go ahead and run my application, and in my console I'll see 0, 0 come out. So that's really useful. We now are starting an initial point inside of our application. I'm going to go ahead and close my debugger console area. And next, we need to update our tile. So we need to figure out which tile in my array of tiles I'm currently at. So I'm at the 0, 0 point. And I also want to go ahead and use some of the information from my tile and update my storyboard or my view so that I can see some of the information to make sure that my tile is working properly. So we should be able to see point 1. Or we should be able to see the number 1 come out in our story for our label. So let's see how that's going to work. I'm actually going to create a helper method, and we've seen one of these before. We don't have to declare the method name in our header file because no other class is going to need to use this method. This is going to be internal or only for ccViewController.m's use. And what it's going to do is it's going to update our tile. And every time we call this method, we're going to be able to update the information on our screen. Now, why are we bothering to create a helper method? Well, we're going to be reusing this functionality or updating information on our screen quite a bit. So it's useful to have it modularized into a method so that we can reuse it, because we're going to have to use this inside of the north button, the west button, the south button, the east button, as well as view.did_load, and we might even need it in other places later. So let's start off and we can write void update tile, and we notice that this method does not take any arguments and it does not return any values. And we're going to write a line of code here. We're going to say we're actually going to do an embedded method call, so we're going to say self.tiles object at index, and we can say self.currentPoint.x. So we know that self.currentPoint.x is going to return 0, so that we're going to get the first object in self.tiles And the first object is going to be the first array I added to self.tiles. Next, we're going to say object at index, and we're going to say self.currentPoint.y. So inside of the array, right, we're getting an array back from the first method call here. When we have this new array back, we're going to say, okay, now give me the object at 0 inside of that array. So give me my first array and give me the first object in that first array. So this we should set equal to a value. Well, we know that the object type we're going to get back is a CC_tile model. So why don't we write CC_tile model? And since it's an object, we need to add a char star here. We can say tile model is equal to this, right? Because we're going to be getting a tile object back. Well, we have one other issue here, and that's we haven't imported our tile, right? So let's go ahead and import CC_tile, and I can go ahead and change this to CC_tile, my class, right, which matches up with the import I did here. And now I'm able to say CC_tile has a variable name tile model, and I get that back from indexing into my tiles array, which I created in my view_did_load, right? Factory tiles returned my tile array. Next, we can go ahead and update our story label using the tile model's information. So we're going to say self.story label.text is equal to tile model.story. And finally, we need to actually access this information or make this method run. So let's go into view_did_load, and we can say self.updateTile or self_updateTile. It's going to be a method call. We use the keyword self because I created this method inside of the CC View Controller class. I can go ahead and remove this NSLog, and let's go ahead and run our application and see what happens. So now we see story 1 prints out to my label here, or gets updated to my label. And if you're confused as to where this information came from, let's go back to CC Factory. We can see story 1 is our first tile. So we're currently at point 0, 0, which we defined in CC viewcontroller.m. We said our current point was 0, 0. So it makes sense that story 1 would print out. Now if I move this, right, if I said actually we want to start at 1, 1, and I ran my application again, we'd see that now I'm on story 5, right? So that makes sense. We're able to now find our tiles based on a current point.